Aim is just another skill, and like any other skill, particularly hard skills, your proficiency in aiming can be broken down to 4 stages of skill acquisition. Today I want to talk about these 4 stages, and how even just being aware of this model of skill progression will definitely help guide your improvement. Without further ado, the 4 stages of skill acquisition are unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, conscious competence, and unconscious competence. Now, the names of these stages are pretty self-explanatory, but I still want to dig a little at the definition, how they relate to your skill level when it comes to aiming, and how to progress along this scale. So as I mentioned before, the first stage of skill development is unconscious incompetence. This is when you have literally no idea what you're doing, and you don't know what you don't know, so to speak. You have no conceptualization of what a correct action looks like, and you're basically just playing on autopilot. After unconscious incompetence comes conscious incompetence, wherein you become aware of the gap between your skill and the skill level of a good player. This is a really important step, and it's also important to stay aware of the fact that recognizing you are bad is actually progress. Sometimes when players begin to perceive their mistakes, they think that they're actually getting worse at the game, and this can negatively affect their mindset. This is of course a great example of the cognitive bias famously known as the Dunning-Kruger effect, in which people with lower ability perceive themselves to be better than they really are, while people with higher ability perceive themselves to be worse than they actually are. The very act of identifying your mistakes makes you better than your ignorant self from yesterday, who made those same mistakes without a second thought and just didn't notice. I just want to make sure that as you progress and start to notice more flaws in your game, you don't fall into the trap of thinking you are actually getting worse. The next step after learning about our mistakes is progressing to conscious competence, which is the actual development of skill to a good level. But to play at this level, you still have to actively think about what you're doing. That means while you're playing, you are constantly reminding yourself to keep your crosshair up at head level and you're laser focused on the act of shooting opponents on your screen. Progressing to conscious competence demands that you study people who know what they're doing, and you use the experience of others as a model for your improvement. In the esports community, beginners love to try and figure stuff out for themselves, and there's obviously nothing wrong with that. But in basically any other field, a lot of your learning comes from looking at what people already do. Like there's no way I would have played hockey if I had to invent skating for myself. So you shouldn't try to invent aiming or shooting techniques without having some sort of template on which you're basing your learning. After you've studied and modeled your aim after good players and you've developed conscious competence, you then want to attain the final level of proficiency, which is unconscious competence. Now, unconscious competence is essential for a fundamental skill like aim in an FPS, where you don't have to actively think and divert mental resources towards the act of aiming. Instead, it becomes reflexive, like an instinctual skill, and it gives you a foundation upon which you can focus your thinking on decision making and communication without having to worry about whiffing your shots. Becoming unconsciously competent is so straightforward. It really just requires practicing properly and practicing often. And I know that in basically all my videos I prescribe practice like it's hydroxychloroquine, but it really is the only way to attain mastery of any skill. You practice often and you practice right. Now, skills in Valorant, especially aim, are so multifactoriate, and there's just such a distribution of skill levels that the definition of the 4 stages that I've put forward can be a bit unclear. For example, your amazing unconscious competence at aiming as a Plat 1 player would be absolutely incompetent and untenable for a professional player. So you constantly, as you progress, have to reflect on what your current weakest skill is and make sure that you're not autopiloting in areas where you need work. One thing that helps with this is breaking all the skills down as much as you can. Just by talking about aim, we've already simplified this massive scope of how do I improve at Valorant down to how do I improve at aim, but you can go even further. Try thinking about and setting goals for your improvement at crosshair placement, for example. By drilling one thing and narrowing your scope, you can more easily develop mastery or at least unconscious competence for the level you're currently at in a certain skill, and then move on to other skills where you need work. So as I mentioned before, going from doing a wrong thing unconsciously to trying to implement the right behavior consciously and eventually make it automatic will feel like you have regressed at first. You need to fight through it. If your brain is currently hardwired to aim at someone's body when they peek you, fighting your instincts and slowing down your thinking to intentionally aim at their head will be way slower at first and cost you tons of joules. but it is still progress, even though the scoreboard will look worse in the interim. The model for improving your aim is clear. The first thing you need to do is identify your areas of weakness and especially bad habits that you're doing routinely without thought. Then you find the correct version of what you're doing and force yourself to do it intentionally, no matter how much worse it makes you in the short term. Simply reframing your model of improving to the framework of the 4 stages of competence will definitely help you improve your aim and other skills in a purposeful, intentional manner. Thank you for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed and or learned something, and if you did not, you can leave a thumbs down and call me an idiot in the comments below. If you want to join our community, you can subscribe. I'm going up to 2 videos a week, and I'm really enjoying making the content, so I hope to see you next time. Peace.